Welcome to Rosie the Reviewer. We're your hosts. I'm Sam,
And I'm Marcia.
and we like World War II media, and we want to talk about it.
Welcome back to Rosie the Reviewer. This week we are talking about the movie Valkyrie, which came out in 2008. It was directed by Bryan Singer and written by Christopher McQuarrie and Nathan Alexander. It's based on real events, and it tells the story of a failed assassination plot against Hitler in July of 1944. You can watch this movie on Amazon Prime or possibly on Netflix, depending on where you live. What did you think of this movie?
I liked it more than I thought I was going to for a Tom Cruise movie. My previous knowledge of this movie was that it was the Tom Cruise eye patch movie and or the Tom Cruise butt pad movie. Because I don't know if you remember, there was some controversy about him perhaps wearing butt pads in this movie to look like he had more cake than he actually does. And I will say, watching the movie, I did not notice one way or the other. So I guess I can't speak to that controversy and put it to bed based on my knowledge. But yeah, it's a movie about a really interesting part of history, the internal German resistance to Adolf Hitler. And we had previously talked a little bit about von Stauffenberg because his sister-in-law was, of course, Melita von Stauffenberg, one of the women who flew for Hitler that we talked about in our Claire Mollet episode. And yeah, I found the movie maintained the tension pretty well. It's an action movie, but it's not, I know you're thinking Tom Cruise Mission Impossible. It's not really like that. I found they did a decent job overall. It is kind of Hollywood, so I won't say that it's perfect or that it's my favorite movie ever made, but I thought it was all right. I enjoyed my watching experience. How about you?
I also really enjoyed this movie. Like you, I was expecting an action movie, a kind of sensationalized movie for sure, but I like the way they did it. Barely any of the actors are German. It's mostly famous Hollywood actors, but they did it in kind of a smart way where we'll get to it when we get into the movie too, but I liked it. And I thought Tom Cruise was not very Tom Cruise, which for me is a good thing.
Yeah, I didn't think his performance was show-stopping, but I also didn't think he was bad.
I didn't have the feeling as I was watching the entire time to be like, hey, that's Tom Cruise over there. And it's got some Dutch actresses in it that we've seen in other movies already, so that's fun for me. And some other people that were all in the same movie. They were all in Black Book, so if you want to go listen to that episode, that's also fun. Yeah, I thought the pacing was good. It looked pretty good too. And I kept hoping for an ending that I knew wasn't coming because obviously we know what happens because it's history. But they do a good job of making you feel for the characters involved and hoping that they get a different ending. So yeah, I liked it.
Yeah, I always like that in a history movie where you do kind of manage to hope that the ending will be different this time. I will say that some of the things in this movie, for example, von Stauffenberg's and the other collaborators, some of their motivations for trying to assassinate Hitler were really oversimplified and dumbed down. I don't know if this was because it was not meant to be a quote unquote history documentary and it was just meant to be a fun movie, but I'm sure we'll talk about that more as we go on. But there's definitely bits and pieces that I know people took issue with when it came out, particularly in Germany. But
I think it's quite interesting, and that's the last thing I'll say about it, that Hollywood chose to make a movie about this part of history that's so far removed from actual Hollywood. Anyway, let's get into the plot.
So there's an opening card that says the following is based on a true story. And then the loyalty oath to Hitler appears on the screen. So this would have been an oath. I think it came about in 1934. It was early on in Hitler's tenure anyways, where members of the Wehrmacht and the SS and other organizations that would have reported to Hitler had to swear this oath. And it's, I swear by God this sacred oath that I shall render unconditional obedience to Adolf Hitler, Führer of the German Reich and people, Supreme Commander of the Armed Forces, and that I shall at all times be ready as a brave soldier to give my life for this oath.
What I liked about this scene, and in general how they set up the beginning of the movie, is the fact that they start in German, and then they very slowly segue into English, and that way you don't get the awkward, let's do English with a German accent, or let's do bad speaking of German or anything like that. It's quite smart.
Yeah, I like that too. And I like how they set up that Klaus von Stauffenberg was in the military. And I think that for the most part, people would assume that when you are in the military, your loyalty is to your country. So I like that they set up this thing where they were like, no, everyone who was in the military was actually required to say that they were not fighting, quote unquote, for their country, but they were fighting specifically for one man. And so what does it mean that von Stauffenberg and these other collaborators deliberately went against that? And it kind of ties into what their motivations are. And I just thought it was a good way to frame the movie.
I feel like you've given me a good segue into the next scene, which is the scene where we see the German 10th Panzer Division in Tunisia, North Africa, and we meet our quote-unquote main character, Colonel Klaus von Stauffenberg, played by Tom Cruise, and he's writing a letter outlining his opposition to Hitler and his regime, and he's basically saying that in order to save Germany, they need to oppose Hitler. After he writes the letter, he goes and speaks to a superior officer played by Bernard Hill, who I keep forgetting is dead. The actor, he's great. And he's most likely portraying Lieutenant General Wolfgang Fischer, and he suggests that they disobey orders to do an attack and that they should retreat instead because he's afraid that all the men are going to die.
Yeah, and Fischer agrees with him. So we're starting to get a sense that perhaps von Stauffenberg isn't the only one in the army who has reservations about some of the things they're being asked to do. But before they can actually do anything one way or the other, they get attacked by Allied aircraft, and von Stauffenberg is severely wounded. This happened on April 7th, 1943, and he's a mess. He loses an eye. He loses one of his hands and several fingers on the other hand. He's quite badly injured, and he has to be evacuated to Germany. And while he's there, he gets visited by his wife, one of our very few female characters, Nina Schenk Grafen von Stauffenberg, played by Clarice Van Houten, who was one of the Dutch actors that you had mentioned earlier.
She's great. I love that she gets to be in Hollywood movies.
Yeah, she does a really good job, I think, with very few lines in this movie to display a lot of inner emotion, even though, like, externally she's very still.
She does a lot of eye acting. She's got beautiful eyes in this, too. Damn, she's gorgeous. I don't know what they did to the film in terms of editing, but she just looks really beautiful in this.
Yeah, she's kind of representative of what von Stauffenberg has to lose, because not only does he have this beautiful wife that he cares about very much, but he also has 4 children, and she's pregnant with their 5th.
I forgot she was pregnant. That kind of slipped my mind. But yeah, we get to see their relationship a little bit. I kind of wish we got Melita as well, as you've said to me before we started recording. But I do understand why they took a little bit of a tighter approach to the focus here. But still, we need more women, more great women.
For sure. And they also excluded his brother, or one of his brothers, because he had a couple. One of his brothers was also involved in the plot, but they left that out of the movie for streamlining purposes.
Ah, right, yeah. All right. So it's March 13th in 1943. There is a failed plot by General Henning von Treskov, played by Kenneth Branagh, and he tries to assassinate Hitler by smuggling a control box onto his plane when he visits the Eastern Front. And it kind of made me laugh just a little bit because it seems so simple. And then it fails. I'm like, Jesus, why does it fail? It's such a brilliant move.
Yeah, it won't be the only time they try to assassinate Hitler either, this particular group of guys. But yeah, this one not successful. But it's nice to see Kenneth Branagh in another history movie.
Another one. So we've seen him in Dunkirk, I think, that we've reviewed. So if you want to go listen to Dunkirk, go on and listen to that episode.
Yes, and where we also talked about how great Kenneth Branagh always is.
Yeah, he's great.
So General Hans Oster, we don't see much of him, but what happens to him is sort of the catalyst for a lot of the stuff that happens in the movie. So he's a resistance member. He's the deputy head of the Abwehr, which is the German intelligence. And he's arrested on suspicion of helping Abwehr officers that were caught helping Jews to escape Germany. He eventually was executed in a concentration camp in April of 1945, so not a good ending for him. He is mentioned in our Munich, The Edge of War episode, so definitely go check that out if you're interested in learning a little more about the German resistance. And so because Hans Oster is out of the picture, General Friedrich Olbricht, played by Bill Nighy, he recruits von Stauffenberg to take Oster's place in a resistance plot. And now this plot involves lots of sort of big movers and shakers in Germany in military and civilian life. So we have Treskov, who we mentioned already. They also include General Ludwig Beck, played by Terence Stamp, who actually unfortunately passed away a couple of days before we recorded this. So safe travels, sir. Godspeed. Dr. Karl Girdler, played by Kevin McNally, and Field Marshal Erwin von Witzelben, played by David Schofield.
I love this cast. They are like pillars of acting, I feel. They're all very good.
The nice thing is that, number one, they all have fairly recognizable faces. Even if you don't recognize the names, if you saw them, you'd be like, oh yeah, I've seen that guy in something before. So it's a combination of that and the fact that they're all stellar actors that you can tell all of these guys apart and you remember who they are, which can be difficult sometimes in a movie with a bunch of foreign sounding names and historical figures you've perhaps never heard of. So I did enjoy that aspect.
Yeah. There's also something funny that I haven't figured out. In the movie, they call von Stauffenberg, so they never include the von for some reason. If anybody German is listening to this podcast, can you tell us if that's a common thing to do, to just not include the von to the last name? Or if that's a very American thing to do? We just don't know the answer to this.
Well, the von was excluded on Wikipedia as well when I was just having a quick look. So I was like, I don't know if this is
why
correct or not. But yeah, von Stauffenberg, once he joined this group of guys, some of them maybe regretted recruiting him because he's a real go-getter. And he quickly became a driving force behind the several attempts on Hitler's life to follow. And he's quoted as saying, "The aim is to preserve the Reich. It is necessary to save Germany from unconditional surrender and from total occupation." And so you can hear from that his first motive is not to end the Holocaust, which is not to say that it wasn't a motive and that it didn't factor into his decisions, but it wasn't his primary motive. And there were some members of the group of collaborators that was their primary motive, but certainly not for everybody. And he kind of comes from this long line of German nobility where they really believe in honor and behaving well and the sanctity of Germany, the motherland, that sort of thing. And so these are guys who are like, well, what Hitler's doing is not very honorable and it's not going to lead to an honorable end for Germany. And that's kind of where their thought process is at. And so he hadn't necessarily been an ardent opponent of Hitler initially, like a lot of people in Germany, I suppose, but his views on the Nazi Party really soured after two events. So the Night of the Long Knives, which was a political purge where Hitler got rid of a lot of his political opponents, and Kristallnacht, which, as most people probably know, was an evening early on in the Holocaust where a lot of Jewish businesses were destroyed and some Jewish people were rounded up and taken away.
The Night of the Long Knives, I'd forgotten the name actually before doing any research. I did know about this event, but it's very early on in Hitler's tenure as well. It's in 1934. So Kristallnacht, I think, is in 1938. So quite some time passes between those two. So they had plenty of time to know that Hitler was kind of a dick. But I guess it took some of them quite a long time to really start believing that. And some of the biggest names like Reinhard Heydrich and Himmler were behind the attacks on the Night of the Long Knives, or at least they were driving forces in it. So they stuck around for a long time after, so they were really loyal to Hitler.
Yeah. So anyway, those were the couple of events that really, von Stauffenberg, perhaps not initially an ardent opponent of Hitler, but those really turned him off.
To get kind of to the name of the movie, it's called Valkyrie. It's called that because Operation Valkyrie is part of this movie, and this was a German contingency plan for activating the reserve army in the event of a breakdown of social order. And in the movie, Stauffenberg suggests, and in real life, suggests assassinating Hitler and using Valkyrie to take over the country in the immediate aftermath of that. There is some debate at first about whether or not they should kill Hitler. What happens if you kill Hitler? What happens then? Who gets to be in power? It's one of those discussions, but they do end up deciding that it can't be done in another way.
Yeah, there's a sense from some of the members of the conspiracy plot that Hitler should be put on trial for the things that he's done, and Germany should be seen to take accountability, or at least Hitler should be seen to take accountability for what he's done to Germany and to the rest of the world. But von Stauffenberg is pretty sure that they should kill Hitler, and it's his point of view that wins the day.
I remember in the Munich the Edge of War episode and in the movie there being a scene where they talk about shooting Hitler, and someone, I don't know who it is anymore, say, we're not going to shoot him, are we? We're just going to talk to him and put him on trial. So it's like, I mean, some of them still believe in fairness and in justice, maybe, even though what Hitler's doing is anything but that.
Yeah. And at this point, too, it's pretty late in the war. The Normandy landings have happened. This is the summer of 1944. And so anyone with sense can see the writing on the wall in Germany. They know that the war is probably not going to end in their favor. And so they kind of perceive this as their last opportunity to act, and to act in such a way where Germany won't be brought to its knees again at the end of the war by another Treaty of Versailles, for example, and to get rid of Hitler and retake control and maybe come to some kind of terms with the Allies that's not just simply unconditional surrender. They're thinking, if we don't kill Hitler, then there's just going to be this whole like song and dance where he has to be on trial and blah, 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 and he still has all these supporters, etc. So von Stauffenberg and co. edit the Valkyrie plan to exclude the SS. And this is pretty ballsy. So they take the Valkyrie plan, they edit it, because what they're planning to do is use the SS as a patsy, right? They're going to, as soon as they assassinate Hitler, they're going to tell everyone that the SS did it. And they're going to use Operation Valkyrie to sort of take back the country from this quote unquote SS coup. And so they make these edits, and then von Stauffenberg goes to Hitler himself, played by David Bamber, and he's like, I have this new plan. You should take a look at it. And Hitler is so creepy in this scene, y'all. I mean, I'm sure Hitler is always creepy, but he's just, the whole time you're so sure that he knows what's going on, and he's just playing with von Stauffenberg. But it appears that he doesn't, and he has a quick leaf through the plans, and then he's like, well, if you say it's good, I'm sure it's good, and then he signs off on it.
Doesn't he also make some remark about Valkyrie, or in German it's Valkyrie, which is a piece of classical music? I think he makes a quip about the musical piece or something. Yeah. It's like really, really innocent, but also menacing at the same time.
Yes, and there is also a scene where von Stauffenberg is listening to Wagner in his house.
All right, it's Wagner, yes. It's just this whole scene, they're in like his Bavarian Alps retreat called the Berghof, and it's this really scary place. I mean, I think it's scary. I don't know why I think it's scary, but everybody in the room is so tense.
Yeah, I mean, partially it's scary because we know Hitler made a lot of weapons-grade terrible decisions in there. I don't know if we would think it was quite as terrible if we didn't know that.
He apparently spent more time in the Berghof retreat than he did in any of his other quote-unquote headquarters. So he spent a lot of time in there. You can still visit the place. The actual building is gone, but you can still find some foundations of the building in the forest. So you can see the view from the big window that we also see in the movie. If you want to go there, I mean, I think I would find it pretty terrifying to be there, but that might just be me. Von Stauffenberg is promoted as Chief of Staff to the Commander-in-Chief of the Reserve Army, which grants him better access to Hitler's timetable and to the man himself. At first, I think he doesn't really want this position, but is it Bill Nighy who insists that he needs to take the position in order to get close, I think?
Yeah, I think von Stauffenberg is kind of like, I'm kind of busy planning an assassination, and the Bill Nighy character is like, well, do you not see how this will be helpful in the assassination, though? Because you'll know where Hitler's going to be.
Yeah, I keep forgetting his name, but I think it's Obrecht is in the name of the character. Von Stauffenberg gets assigned an adjutant called Lieutenant Werner von Heften, played by Jamie Parker, and I feel like this is my favorite character in the entire movie. He doesn't really, von Stauffenberg tells him, look, we have this plan to assassinate Hitler. And von Heften is like, okay, that's fine, I can do that. No hesitation.
Yeah, he's pretty immediately into it, which good for him. Yeah, so Ulbricht and von Stauffenberg approach General Friedrich Fromm, played by Tom Wilkinson, and he's the head of the reserve army. So he's von Stauffenberg's boss, effectively. And the reason why they approach him is because they're going to need him to mobilize the reserve army during the coup. So that's kind of what happens, right? They assassinate Hitler. They tell everyone it was the SS trying to do a coup, and then they mobilize the reserve army, and then the reserve army would go around and they would arrest all the members of the SS and like quickly neutralize all the opposition. And so without him, they're going to really struggle to make this important component of their plan work. And he declines to participate, but he crucially does not rat them out. And he points out to them that his office is bugged. And so he's not going to help them, but he also is not going to stop them.
I must have missed the fact that his office was bugged. I did not notice, but that's just me, obviously. But also, I feel like this man kind of wants to be on whatever side is winning. He's like, I'll see what I'll do when it happens.
Yeah. I think that in real life, he was a little bit more involved than they depict him being in the movie, because his actions later, he takes them probably to save his own skin. But in the movie, they are very much like, no, he doesn't want to be involved. He's not involved whatsoever.
It's July 15, 1944. The assassination attempt at the Wolf's Lair doesn't go off because Heinrich Himmler is not present. They've kind of said, look, you can only do it if everybody that needs to be there is there. And Ulbricht mobilizes the reserve army, which they pass off as a drill, so they get a lucky escape there.
Yeah. The Wolf's Lair was Hitler's Eastern Front military headquarters, at that point just 50 miles from the Russian lines. It's in modern-day northeastern Poland. But this attempted attack that we see in the film, actually took place at Berchtesgaden, which we have seen in Band of Brothers, and you can go listen to our episodes about that. But it was changed for the plot, I think, to set the stage of the actual attack for the audience, which did take place at the Wolf's Lair. There were at least two other occasions on July 6th and July 11th when von Stauffenberg attended a meeting with Hitler carrying a bomb, but did not prime it on either occasion because no other senior leadership were in attendance. And it was kind of thought that there's no point in killing Hitler if you don't also take out at least Himmler, that you need to get rid of the chain of command as well. Fromm threatens them if they try to control the reserve army again. He's like, yo, the way you mobilized the reserve army and told everyone it was a drill, I know what you're up to. Don't do that shit again. And von Stauffenberg, meanwhile, he's attacking Girdler behind the scenes for his indecisiveness, because Girdler's the one who keeps being like, no, don't kill Hitler if Himmler's not there. And von Stauffenberg is like, how many more times do you think I'm going to be able to smuggle a bomb into Hitler's presence, my guy? So they sort of have a little bit of a row about this. Girdler tries to oust von Stauffenberg from the group, but Beck supports him. And they kind of get rid of Girdler for a bit because he's the one that they want to be chancellor when Hitler is gone. But they tell him that the SS has his number and they're going to be looking for him and he has to get out of the country. So he fucks off for a bit.
On July 20th of the same year, Stauffenberg gets another chance. He returns to the Wolf's Lair. Conditions there are not optimal because the meeting is held in the summer barrack rather than in the bunker where it was originally supposed to be. And he does not have time to prime the second bomb. They have two, but he only primes one. But he manages to leave the bomb close to Hitler and then excuses himself to take a phone call. And the phone call actually does happen. It's set up, obviously, but it's his way to escape. And he gets out of the building, and as he does, he sees the explosion. So he assumes that Hitler is dead, and he returns to Berlin with von Hefsen. And it's pretty close still. They have to get out of the Wolf's Lair, and they have to drag their way out of one of the patrols there at the gate. And I thought this was a really clever scene, and I wonder if that happened in real life or not. But
I think they had to blag their way through 3 checkpoints in real life to get back to where their plane was waiting. But yeah, I think another reason why we see the earlier attack or attempted attack take place at the Wolf's Lair is because earlier on in the movie, they're kind of talking about how if you plant a bomb in this underground bunker, it sort of holds the explosion in. So all of the force of the explosion, it has nowhere to go because it can't get out through these walls. And so it really is going to have a very deadly, significant impact. And so when we see that bunker in the first attempted attack, we're like, oh yeah, like they're going to be fucked because they set off a bomb in there. But in the second actual attack, when we see them having this meeting in the summer barrack, it's quite a bit different. Like, this building is not a bunker in the way that the other one was a bunker. And so that really hurts the bomb's ability to do what they want it to do. And additionally, I just laugh at the idea of, like, at this point, von Stauffenberg has like 3 fingers because of this explosion that he was in when he was hurt in the army. And so I'm like, of course he only managed to prime 1 bomb and not 2. Like, this seems like a very difficult task for someone with only 3 fingers.
As someone who can only use 1 hand, I can only concur. And also, another thing about this assassination attempt is that Himmler's not there. So they have like a little bit of a back and forth on the phone about whether or not it should happen, I think. He's talking to, I forgot his name, but I really like this actor. He's like, I want to say Albrecht's assistant who handles the phone for him, but he's like higher up, I think. Albrecht's like, no, we're not going to do it. And he says, no, wait, do it anyway. So this is so tense.
Unfortunately for them, Hitler's life was saved by a last-minute inadvertent moving of the briefcase behind a heavy table leg. So they're sitting at this huge conference table, and someone is sitting there, and he's like, oh, this briefcase is in my way. So he like moves it behind this table leg, and that's probably what prevented Hitler and a lot of other people from being killed, because it shielded them, at least partially, from the explosion. So 4 people were killed in the blast, but Hitler suffered only minor injuries. I mean, he still got pretty fucked up, but it fed into his belief that he was invincible, unfortunately. He actually sent his tattered trousers to his mistress, Eva Braun, for preservation for posterity. He was like, you're going to want to keep these fucked up pants because they prove to everyone that I can't be killed.
Yeah.
And we also talked about the July 20th plot, as we said earlier in our Claire Mully episode. Female test pilot Melita von Stauffenberg, who was Klaus's sister-in-law, she was actually originally intended to fly the plane that would get von Stauffenberg to safety after the assassination, but the plan ended up getting changed. We don't specifically know why, but we think probably because the only plane that she had access to that wouldn't be registered or tracked anywhere was her own plane. And it just simply did not have the possible mileage to be able to make it all the way to Berlin and back. So he ended up going with the backup plan instead.
I wonder if that also, in part, saved her life. We know that it's not the only thing that saved her life, but I wonder if she'd flown that plane, I think she would have just, there would have been no talking her out of that, basically.
Yeah, probably if she'd been caught. Yeah. General Erich Falgiebel, played by Eddie Izzard, who honestly, at first I was like, wait a minute, I recognize that face. Oh my God, it's Eddie Izzard. I feel like I haven't seen them in anything in forever. But anyway, he passes along a garbled message to Ulbricht before cutting off all communication. So he was in on it, and basically his job was, once the explosion happens, he cuts off all communication, and that way no messaging can get to the outside world, and only von Stauffenberg and his collaborators, only their messaging can get out to everybody. And unfortunately, when he's on the phone, he's trying to tell them that, like, Hitler isn't dead, but the message doesn't get through. And without confirmation that Hitler is dead, Ulbricht vacillates. And this is a disastrous couple of hours where they waste time. And unfortunately, that's probably one of the reasons why this wasn't successful.
So, Hitler wasn't dead. They thought he was, though. At least von Stauffenberg was absolutely convinced that he was dead. Colonel Albrecht von Kronheim, played by Christian Burkle, forges Albrecht's signature, and he proceeds anyway, so he does mobilize the reserve army. But several precious hours have already gone by, as you said, and across Germany, confusion reigns as the Wehrmacht begins arresting SS officers and Nazi party leaders. You think for a moment, again, that things are going to be okay, even though you know the history. You're like, yes, go on, do it, arrest them. Wolf Heinrich Graf von Heldorf, played by Waldemar Kobus, who was also in Black Book. He's the chief of the Berlin police, and he pledges his allegiance to the conspirators almost immediately. Meanwhile, Fromm has been told that Hitler is alive, and he refuses to help the conspiracy, so they arrest him, and he's not very pleased about it.
Yeah, there's this scene where they're all kind of in a room together, and they're calling various regions around Germany, and they're trying to get in touch with who's in charge to get their messaging out first. trying to get in touch with generals and whoever they can, politicians, and being like, hey, by the way, the SS did a coup. Are you on our side? Are you with us? And they're trying to get confirmation from people that they're going to be able to carry this off, that they're going to have the requisite support in the various parts of the country. Major Otto Ernst Raymer, played by Thomas Kretschmann, is all set to arrest Joseph Goebbels, played by Harvey Friedman. And they roll up. You're like, okay, this is going to be great. They're going to get Goebbels. He's one of the main guys. Like, let's get rid of him. But unfortunately, Goebbels is like, wait, before you arrest me, there's someone on the phone for you. And it turns out that Hitler himself, who has survived the explosion, is on the phone. And Raymer recognizes his voice, of course. He knows that it's actually Hitler. And unfortunately, this is sort of the beginning of the tide starting to turn against our collaborators. So Margareta von Oven, played by Helena Rain, she's the secretary to the plotters at great personal risk. She was the one who, before the assassination attempt had even happened, she had typed out all of these announcements of like, Hitler is dead, here's what we're doing now, blah, 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 which of course would have gotten her shot if they had caught her with them. At this point, she's been helping them out to get people on the phone, etc. But von Stauffenberg and the others start to realize that this is not going to go well. So von Stauffenberg tells her that she can flee.
A little bit about Helena Ryan, who's also in Black Book with Clarice van Houten. The two of them kind of took Hollywood by storm. And even though Clarice is a bigger actress, I feel like they kind of had a pact at the time where whenever Clarice would get onto a big Hollywood role, she would introduce Helena. They were like a package deal. And I kind of love that. Just women supporting each other in a pretty brutal industry. So I thought that was quite nice. The movie shows her, Margareta von Oven, desperately trying to call von Stauffenberg's family for him. They fled. They've gone to a different city because he knew they wouldn't be safe if anything went wrong. And he keeps trying to reach them, but they're not able to get through. So you're really tense. You're like, you don't know if they're dead or if they've been arrested, or you get to feel a little bit for von Stauffenberg as well in this. And they try to make him really human.
Yeah. Now, von Oven is not only one of our few heroic female characters, but in real life, she was sent away on the day of the coup by Treskov because he thought she'd be sort of a handy person to have in the back pocket. So he advised her that they might need her. And if they did, they would send a plane. And this might have been why Melita von Stauffenberg remained on standby, even though her role as escape pilot for her brother-in-law Klaus had been replaced.
So she wasn't actually there on the day of the coup in real life? But I do like that she's in the movie for a bit longer. So there's that.
For sure. I'm not mad that they changed it.
So as things start to collapse in on them, the building they're in is being stormed, and von Stauffenberg is wounded in the following confrontation. And despite Raymer's protest, he's been ordered to take Stauffenberg and company alive. From immediately court-martials them and sentences von Kroelheim, Obrich, von Heften, and von Stauffenberg to death. And Beck is the only one who is allowed to kill himself. And he even chooses the pistol that he uses to do it.
Yeah, there's sort of a sad historical footnote in that he failed when he shot himself and someone else had to shoot him again in the back of the neck.
No! Jesus, that's rough.
Yeah. And this is sort of circling back to what we had said earlier, where some historians believe that Fromm was more involved than, this movie necessarily depicted. And the reason why he court-martialed and quickly had these main conspirators killed was because he didn't want them to be able to give away his involvement, potentially.
I wondered, because Hitler's the one who says he wants them alive. So he's effectively also defying the Fuhrer.
Yeah, which will come back to bite him in the ass, for sure. And this is the part of the movie where they get them all lined up one by one in front of the firing squad. And when von Stauffenberg is in front of the firing squad, von Heften jumps in front of him. Well, he kind of stands in front of the bullets. And it's just like a moment of, he obviously knows they're going to kill von Stauffenberg anyway, but it's like a moment of expressing this like loyalty and being like, I stand with you even right now at the end. I would do anything to protect you kind of thing. And that scene really got me. I immediately looked it up because I wanted to know if it was true, and it was.
Yes. And there's something brutal about the fact that after this happened, like he steps into the way of the bullets and he's killed. And they could have just shot von Stauffenberg right in that moment. But no, they pause to take away his body first and then they shoot him. It's so brutal. You can see it coming a mile away, but it's still. I wanted so much for there to be a different ending to this movie.
I don't know. It was only 12 hours from the time von Stauffenberg planted the bomb to his death by firing squad. And it's true that his final words were, "Long live sacred Germany." And before they filmed this scene, the cast and crew, led by Tom Cruise, held a moment of silence because they actually filmed it in the area where the shooting had taken place in real life.
I want to quickly mention we get to see some of the correspondence room as well. I don't know what it's called, but the thing where all the messages come in and get pushed through to other people. And I really like the discussion we see there between two of the people that work there as they are getting messages from both the Wolf's Lair and basically von Stauffenberg. They're like, which of the messages do we put through? And at first they do both. And then eventually they decide to only do the messages from the Wolf's Lair, and that's when it's officially over. But I really like to see that discussion in there.
Yeah, for sure. And some more female characters there too. Women working in the switchboard.
Yes.
Yeah, so Treskov, our Kenneth Branagh character, who is one of our big masterminds, he kills himself in the woods, and this is based on real events. He went into the no man's land between German and Russian lines, and he held a grenade to his own throat. Witzelben and Girdler are executed later, and despite his attempts to get rid of the other conspirators so he wouldn't get in trouble, or perhaps because of those attempts, he ends up being hanged as well. And yeah, I think a little bit later in 1945.
So our main conspirators are executed immediately and the other ones are getting a trial and they are hanged or executed later.
So the Nazi judge that we see hollering away during these trials is Roland Friesler, and he's the judge that we talked about in our Sophie Scholl episode. He handed out over 5,000 death sentences during his tenure, and he died in an American bombing raid in 1945. He narrowly avoided getting himself Nuremberged.
Fuck yeah.
There's a quote I found from Treskov before his death. This would have been a couple of hours before he died, or so I gather. And he said, "The whole world will vilify us now, but I am still totally convinced we did the right thing. Hitler is the arch enemy not only of Germany, but of the world. When, in a few hours' time, I go before God to account for what I have done and left undone, I know I will be able to justify what I did in the struggle against Hitler. A human being's moral integrity begins when he is prepared to sacrifice his life for his convictions."
That is a good letter. But still, how sad, they were so close.
Yeah, bummer.
We get an end card that tells us the July 20 plot was the last of 15 known attempts by Germans to assassinate Adolf Hitler. 9 months later, with Berlin surrounded, Hitler committed suicide. Nina von Stauffenberg and her children survived the war. She died April 2nd, 2006.
Yeah, so when this happened, Hitler invoked the law of Sippenhaft, which is kin detention, and so he arrested Klaus's wife, children, mother, uncle, and brothers, as well as some more distant family. Melita von Stauffenberg, who was also arrested and detained for a few months, but ultimately she was released on the merits of her work for the Luftwaffe. She was such a gifted aeronautical engineer that Goering himself stepped in and was like, "Well, we kind of need her for the war effort, so you should let her out." And there was really no evidence that she had directly participated in the plot. So like you said, that probably saved her ass. But some family members, unfortunately, were less lucky and were executed. Our secretary, von Oven, was arrested and detained for 2 weeks, but later released. And effectively, the regime used the attack as an excuse to clean house, getting rid of anyone it wanted to get rid of, any undesirable people, any political enemies that remained. And so 7,000 people were arrested in the aftermath, and nearly 5,000 of those were executed.
5,000? Jesus Christ. The Night of the Long Knives all over again. It's like, let's kill everybody who doesn't agree with me.
Yep, pretty much. Even Erwin Rommel was implicated, as we mentioned in our Grand Cirque episode. If you recall, he was badly wounded when he was strafed by a plane, and while he was recovering, there was some murmurs or rumors that, if not directly involved in this plot, he potentially knew about it. And so it was strongly advised to him that he kill himself, which he did.
I didn't realize it was this plot.
And poor Nina, Klaus's wife, she gave birth to their 5th child in prison, effectively. And she was separated from her other children for quite a long time. And Melita would operate as sort of a go-between. So she would go and visit the children and bring them gifts and tell them about their parents. And she would also go and visit Nina, and she would go and visit Klaus's mother and all these other people in prison once she was out, obviously. They were in prison for quite a while, but ultimately they did outlive Hitler. So that's a good ending, a little bit, I guess, at least.
Fuck yes.
Yeah. There's a quote on a final end card from the German Resistance Memorial in Berlin that says, "You did not bear the shame. You resisted, sacrificing your life for freedom, justice, and honor." And this memorial is at the Bender Block, which was where the coup was largely carried out, and also where the plotters were executed. And the street now bears von Stauffenberg's name, and it was, of course, as we mentioned, used as a location for the filming.
And that's the end of the movie. I feel like we did most of our notes in the actual plot, but you have a couple more, so go ahead.
Yeah, Henning von Treskov, that's our Kenneth Branagh character. His aide was played by Philip von Skolthus, who was the real von Stauffenberg's grandson.
I think it's so cool when family members get involved in the filming of a TV show or a movie, like in Masters of the Air, where we got a Rosenthal in the TV show. I like that.
And honestly, there's something powerful about the fact that there is a von Stauffenberg grandson, that these people said to Hitler, "You will not be ultimately victorious. We will outlast you." And then they did.
Yes, that's some kind of indication for sure.
Yeah. And Anne Frank wrote about the assassination attempt in her diary, and I will read you the passage. She said, "Now, at last, things are going well. An assassination attempt has been made on Hitler, and for once, not by Jewish communists or British capitalists, but by a German general who's not only a count, but young as well. It's the best proof we've had so far that many officers and generals are fed up with the war and would like to see Hitler sink into a bottomless pit," which I think is very 14-year-old girl of her, and I love it.
Me too. I like the fact that she remarks on him being young.
Oh, yeah.
He's young. Yeah.
I'm sure the dashing young count was an appealing figure for sure. But apparently, when Churchill heard about this, he dismissed the attack as part of a murderous internecine power struggle. So it doesn't sound like the Allies took it particularly seriously.
I mean, what a contrast to Anne Frank being happy and supportive, and then Churchill being like, "Nah, it's not a big deal."
Yeah, I guess if you're Anne Frank, you're going to take all the hope that you can get.
Yeah, of course you will. I think that's it for notes. We should rate it. I had a thought for a second, but it's kind of rude, so I will not finish the thought on air.
You don't want to do Tom Cruise possible butt pads out of 10?
Oh, we can totally do that.
Okay, I will rate this movie. That's a tough one. 6.8 Tom Cruise possible butt pads out of 10. Because, yeah, I think that it's enjoyable to watch a history movie where you don't need a ton of work to remember who all the different characters are. It wasn't dry. Like, it wasn't just a bunch of people talking to each other in offices. There was enough action. Everything was tense, even in scenes where on the surface, you're like, oh, von Stauffenberg is just getting some paperwork approved. Well, he's getting it approved by a very ominous Adolf Hitler. And so this whole movie, I think that it was nice to see some female characters having a role. It was nice to see the German resistance a little bit more. I do feel like they oversimplified it a little bit. You know, von Stauffenberg, this hero who's going to rescue the Jews. And it's a little more nuanced than that. That wasn't necessarily his exact motive, which is not to say that killing Hitler wouldn't have solved that problem. It totally would have, incidentally. But also, there's really no guarantee that von Stauffenberg wasn't necessarily a supporter of a democracy. If he had managed to assassinate Hitler, they probably would have had another authoritarian government run by the military. Which, you know, but so all to say that I think the movie simplified that a lot for audiences, which not necessarily a bad thing if you're just going into this without much knowledge of history and you just want to watch a pretty tense historical thriller, which is pretty effectively done. Like we said at the beginning, I don't think Tom Cruise smashed it by any means, but I also don't think he was terrible. And there were some other pretty good performances in this movie. So overall, pretty decent. I would say if you haven't seen it and you're looking for something to watch, definitely throw it on. You're not going to be disappointed.
Okay, I will rate it 8 possible Tom Cruise butt pats or whatever it is out of 10. It's quite a high rating, but I just I think my expectations were so low, and I ended up enjoying it so much. And I'd already done my research on the history of it, that I didn't necessarily mind the oversimplification, because I agree with you, but it doesn't irk me in the slightest, and I just really enjoyed it. So that's why it gets an 8. I might even watch it again. It's one of those. It's just really kind of tense and exciting for me. So it gets an 8. I'm sure I've never given any action movie an 8. So there you go.
Yeah, I really did not have high hopes for this as a Tom Cruise movie. And you know what he said at, I think it was the premiere of Valkyrie when it came out? He said to a journalist, I always wanted to kill Hitler, which to me, when I read that, I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those movies. But no, it'll be better than you think it will be.
Yeah, I really liked it. I'm so surprised that I really liked it. But I guess it's a surprise that gives it a higher rating. Like, if I had been expecting to like it, I think it would have been like a 7. But it just gets an 8 for being surprisingly decent.
Definitely. Are you reading anything?
I'm reading Tony Rushmore's book about road seeking, or trying to. And I'm also reading a couple bits and pieces here and there about Martha Gellhorn. I know we've mentioned her probably about 3 times already in other episodes, but the episode about her is coming up soon, guys, so I'm trying to do some more bits and pieces here and there. And I'm also thinking about reading Their Finest. Is the book called Their Finest as well?
It was originally called Their Finest Hour and a Half, but I think they changed it to match the movie.
All right, because we are covering that as well, and we are doing that with the Donut Dollies, so that'll be fun. What are you reading?
I'm reading Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee by Dee Brown, which is, I would say, quite a famous book about the history of Indigenous people and how they were treated in sort of the late 19th century in the US. I took a crack at it a few years ago, and I only made it maybe a third of the way through, so I'm circling back. I'm trying again.
I think that's really brave. Whenever I get into a book and I can't finish, that's it for that book. It'll go onto the pile of never read. But
well, it's not that it's bad. I just went through an era where I had a hard time finishing nonfiction, but I've gotten so into the habit of reading nonfiction now that I just think it'll be easier for me to finish.
What percentage of your reading is nonfiction now, would you say? Is it like 80%?
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it's wild. I find it really difficult still reading nonfiction, especially if they are over 200 pages, which all of them are. So
yeah. Although, you know what? I was reading about the Norman Mailer.
Who is Norman Mailer again? I know this name.
He's an American writer. Yeah, it's called The Naked and the Dead. That's his World War II novel. And apparently it's phenomenal and everyone recommends it. And I was like, oh, maybe I'll pick up a copy. Well, it's over 700 pages. So I'm like, I will pick up a copy because I do want to read it, but it's not making its way to the top of my to-read pile. This is not a light thing I'm going to like dash through in a weekend. I'm going to need some time.
You will read this book in 2027.
Yes.
At this point.
Yeah.
That's it for this episode, guys. Thank you so much for listening. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts. You can follow us on Instagram at Rosie the Reviewer Podcast. You can send this episode to a friend who is maybe a little bit skeptical about Tom Cruise being in a World War II movie, but this will prove them wrong. What else can you do? You can visit our website, www.rosieTheReviewer.com. And we will see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.